Good morning everyone, Jake Wolki here, welcome to Wolki Farm. It is the 21st of April and we're doing a online farm tour. We were really excited this year to start our farm tour series, giving everyone an autumn experience out here, but coronavirus has knocked that on the head. So we're bringing the farm to your lounge room via Facebook and YouTube, and we've got a few things we want to show you, so come and have a look. Before too far, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of the main bodies out here. We've got Mr. Michael, and we've got T-Bone, Daddy Bear, and Coco, the livestock guardian dog. This is, when you arrive at Wolki Farm and drive into the driveway, this is the first production area you'll see, which is our budding market garden. So we're a small regenerative farm here located in Albury, New South Wales. So we're on the New South Wales Victorian border in Australia, southern New South Wales, and the border of the two states is the Murray River, which we can see in the distance. About half of our land is located on river flats, and we have a cafe in town. So the market garden is designed to grow vegetables and produce along with our urban garden, including a couple greenhouses in town on site at Cafe Musette, to keep the produce fresh and seasonally, and reduce our footprint, and so we can be sure of where the food's coming. It's a little bit of a gardener's dream, because the way that gardens normally work in a productive sense is they're having to supply on order. So the cafe tells the farmer or the gardener what they want, and then the gardener has to produce it and give it. I've set things up a little bit backwards because it's easier for us just to grow stuff, and if it works, it works, and then we give it to the cafe, and the onus is on them to produce it into lovely food to sell. So it's a good little model for us because we can try things and experiment with things, and if it works, we've got an outlet to sell the stock straight away, which is great. We've just cleared out a heap of beds and planted some new ones, and we've had a few trial and errors this year. So one of the first things we tried when we started up this market garden, maybe end of last winter was when we started shaping this together, was direct seeding our crops, which just did not work because we're coming off the back of a pretty rough drought here in this area, and we underestimated how starving all the birds would be, and they ate all our seeds. We started with a green manure cover crop, we seeded in our vegetables and everything, and we just got absolutely hammered. So we've started raising seedlings in our greenhouse in town, and we've had a better success with that, timing everything. We're still getting used to that. When you've got animals on a farm, crop production is really a second tiered priority, because you need to make sure your animals are fed and watered and comfortable. Another challenge here is just how hot it gets through summer. I know we're talking about winter now, but in summer we can reach mid-40s for a few weeks on a row pretty comfortably, and that poses a lot of challenges with water use and keeping your vegetables and your animals for that matter watered properly. So we've gone for a really deep cover of a rice mulch. We really enjoy using the rice mulch because it's cheap, and we can stack it on really thick. If you look on these beds here, we've probably almost got a 10 centimeter covering over the beds, which is going to keep the beds fed. It's going to keep the microbes in there chewing away and eating this. It's going to keep them warm through winter, cool through summer, and really start to control weeds coming up and help us with our water use. So at the moment, what have we got planted, Mr. Michael? We've got peas along the end there. We've just ripped out all of our eggplants or aubergines, depending on what language you're coming from. And we have kale. And then we've got some micro herbs, some cauliflower, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts. And we've got this is all annuals, being crops that grow for one season cycle and then die off. In our orchard, which we'll show you soon, we've got some perennials. So we've got some things like perennial leafy greens and herbs. Come with me, Thomas. We just use a simple, here you can see our kale coming up. If you want to get right in there and have a look for everybody. These we only put in less than a week ago. You can see we're almost getting cold mornings that are nailing them a little bit while they're young. And we're just running a, what's that, a 12 mil drip line, just 2 drip lines along the garden beds. These are our piggies, which are my favourite animals on the farm. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, so Terry's father here, Klaus Wolki, came over from Germany 60 years ago and landed in Adelaide in South Australia. And he was a tool maker, and one of the first self-employed roles he got into a few years after he'd been in the country and got married and settled down was he had a piggery in the hills above Adelaide. Was the piggery in Gamaraka, Terry? Gamaraka, where the big rocking horse is there. And as a young man, I've grown up listening to all of his fond stories about pigs, and it's so exciting for us to have pigs once again, and they're fun. Let's go and have a look at them. Watch your electric fence there, Mr. Thomas. So when you're talking about the difference between industrial farming and regenerative farming, pigs are one of the biggest tragedies in industrial farming, in my opinion. The way they jam them into little concrete structures, don't give them any access to fresh grass, the great outdoors, dirt, sunshine and wind, and keep them in jail cells really is a real tragedy, especially once you spend a little bit of time with pigs and you start to realise how intelligent and personable and cheeky and boisterous these animals are. So we're incredibly happy to be able to give the pigs this experience. So these are pastured pigs, which means that they're on grass. They're not free range, because free range, the term generally complies with people who are doing more of a set stock arrangement. So the pigs are in one big generous outdoor area, but they're not moved, and pretty soon pigs will nail a paddock and turn it into a pretty barren area, and anytime anything vegetation tries to grow, they're all over it and nothing really gets a chance to rest and recover. So we've got our main dam on the paddock in the back, which we've fenced off. You can see we've just got every 4 meters, Michael's drilled in a fence post, and we've actually got one hot wire, which is 30 centimeters above the ground. Let's show them, Michael, they might be interested. So this is all we have keeping these pigs out of the dam, because all of our waterways on the farm are fenced off from direct livestock access. We pump the water out to all the animals, and this has been extremely successful at containing our animals, and I'll show you a bit later in our farrowing pens, but we actually train our pigs to a hot wire before they hit the paddock. And that's in the center of the paddock, the dam. And then when Michael and Terry and I come out and move them, we just have single portable hot wires that just strip from the guarding fence around the dam. You might get a little nibble there, Thomas. Out to the perimeter fence. It's sort of like a big, it's like the spokes on a wheel. So this is the hub in the middle, and we just put a hot wire up, and they're in this area for 10, 12, 14 days, whatever it needs, and then we move them. We're always moving them. So this is where they're going to be moving probably in 2 or 3 days, and we've got some fresh bedding ready for them, fresh grass, they're all right. And again, we've got enough paddocks in here that they only touch the same soil about 3 times a year. So everything gets rest and time to recover. You can see the sort of rooting around and disturbance that pigs can manage to put down there, but once if we were to leave pigs on this, they'd just destroy it and the whole farm would look like this. But if we take them off now, there's all these seeds in the seed bank here. They're going to germinate, and we're going to have some fresh new grass. I'll quickly show you our structure here, because we do get quite a few questions about our water structure. So this is a structure that I put together. We call this Waterboy. So this is one paddock that we don't have plumbed water lines into, and we didn't really want to put them in for a few different reasons. So we don't have any trees in here either. the farm was cleared long before we got here. So I thought I'd kill two birds with one stone for the pigs, and we give them a shade structure. So this is really just like the X-wing, which I'll show you later, that our birds are in. It's just an X-truss with an A-frame over the top, so it's their shade. We've got a little 4x4 trailer with an IBC in it. And Tom, come in and show them what we've done with the water. But all we've done is drill I think it's an 18mm hole. You can show them how the pigs use it. 18mm hole in the IBC with a pipe stuck in. There's no fittings. And then we've secured a pig nipple, a drinking valve, into the side of the body. The pig, you can't see, but the pigs are nibbling Thomas's backpack behind him. And we've just put a pig nipple through the side there with a bolt on the back, holding it in, and then a clamp, putting the hose on that, but there's no clamp on the top, and this is just gravity fed. At the moment, we've got about 14 pigs in here of all different ages. Look, they're all coming for drinks now, and it works a treat. So we just drive the trailer out here with a little pump on the back and pump water into this once a week. And our feeder that we use is a roto feeder. We just dump buckets in there once or twice a week as needed. Something else that people might find interesting, if you've got little kiddies watching, these pigs here with the white stripes on their back, that's an English breed, heritage breed called Wessex Saddleback. Saddlebacks are considered a lard pig, so they grow a lot of fat, which is delicious. And that's the main breed we currently have on the farm. These little black ones here, that's a Wessex Saddleback crossed with a Berkshire. And then the red pig that you saw running around before, and he's under the water buoy now getting a drink, he's our boar, who we've just mated with that big Wessex Saddleback girl, and the other one behind me. And the big red pig, he's a Tamworth, and he's the only pig on the farm that has a name, because he's the only one that doesn't have a fast track to becoming sausage, and his name's Tim Tam. He's a great pig. I bought him from a pig farmer in Woodend, Jeremy, and he said he was a good little piglet, and he was absolutely right. So we're going to go and put some more feed in the tractor, and we're going to drive along some of our waterways and show you them, and head down to the X-wing where our chickens are, our egg factory. While the boys are going to the shed and getting feed for the chickens ready, thought I'd quickly show you, this is our orchard. So when Terry bought the farm here, must have been just over 15 years ago, he put this orchard in relatively quickly with good foresight there. And we've got a good range, we've got about 40 trees here of mixed species. So up the front here we've got cherries, we've got a good little citrus row with your mandarins, orange, lemons, limes. We've got a lot of stone fruit here. Got pear, peach, apricot, and we've got apple. So you can see by the range that we're in a climate where we can bud up a lot of the warmer species and cooler species. We have good crops off most of these trees most years. I got pretty fed up with having to mow this orchard, especially with drip lines down. The grass would come up here. We didn't push livestock through here for obvious reasons, damaging trees and the rest. And so we'd have to come in and slash all the weeds away, and that was always a headache with our drip line irrigation in here to help these trees through summer, while they're a lot of them being highly productive. And this last summer was an absolute scorcher, no rain and very, very hot. I remember working out here, there was fires locally, so it was thick with smoke in the air. We had some devastating bushfires not far from here. It was 47 degrees, it just was not a nice day. So we got drip lines to help the trees. The mowing was a headache. I found a gentleman on YouTube, who some of you might know, Paul Gauchi, who has a very popular method of farming called Back to Eden farming, and a lot of carbon on the ground. So carbon in this form is wood chips, and So we've covered this with bicycle boxes. We've got a bicycle store in town also. We've covered the floor with bike boxes. We just pulled out all the sticky tape and all the staples to smother the grass and the weeds. And then we've put down about 30 centimeters of wood chips. And we've been really happy with it. It's really pushed the weeds back. It's composting underneath very well, and in turn feeding the soil, feeding the trees. Holds a lot of water, holds temperature well, so less chores for us, and is easy to manage and easy to walk through. We don't have to mow it. So we're obviously in autumn. The only thing that we're expecting anytime soon is the citrus are coming on. You can see we've got a navel orange here. That almost looks like we had a light frost this morning. You see the oranges are getting quite a big size and they're not very far away now. I just gave those trees a bit of a feed and a prune. And like I said before, we've got some of our perennial herbs. That's a rosemary. This is the Japanese perennial spinach that we use in the cafe. Okinawa spinach, delicious. This is one of our brooding sheds where we raise chicks. And at the moment we've got a bunch of pullets here that are ready to get put out into the X-wing. So they start in the shed under heat lamps. We've got deep bedding systems in there, so they're on deep mulch, sawdust, wood shaving, straw, and we keep adding that while they're manuring to kill all the funky smell and all the rotting and everything there, and keep it composting nicely. Keeps it warm in there for the chicks too. And when they feather up, we let them come out into the run, which also doubles as a pig farrowing yard. So multi-purpose area here. And I told you before that we train our pigs. This is how we train our pigs. So 30 centimeters off the floor, inside the fence, in the farrowing pen, is a hot wire. So the piglets, when they start to root around and explore, which is very quick, pigs move very fast once they're born, they hit a hot wire and they learn to stay away from wires, and we have no problems out in the field. What are we doing, Mr. Michael?
Just whacking a tow ball on so we can move the X-wing.
We're gonna go move some birds. You guys go and do it. I'll quickly show you something while these boys get set up. This is a new fence we've put in. So very similar to the fence in the pig paddock, except these posts are a bit further apart. I think we're working about 10 meter spacings on these ones. And again, we've got single hot wire, and this one's higher. You can see the electric fence in the pigs was under my knees, and this one's up closer to my waist. This one's to keep cattle out of our waterway. So this creek behind us is a mapped waterway. It's 8 Mile Creek in the area, and it's been prone to lots of erosion over the years due to a few reasons. One, up north in Thaguna, there's a lot of housing developments which we believe disrupted the water flow. You've got a lot more concrete, which carries water instead of absorbing water, which pushes it into bigger flood events when it does rain. And then we've got banks falling in, and if you combine that with livestock having direct access to waterways, like cattle walking in here for a drink, you've got really brittle, rough surfaces on your sides with no vegetation holding it together because the cattle have stomped it all and eaten it all. and then the water comes through and pumps it. So enough's enough. We fenced it off from the farm completely, and we've got another creek down the back called Wolki Creek. We've done the same there. I'm about to look this week, buy a few hundred native trees off a local company I've been speaking to. So we're going to be revegetating this. We've come out 3 meters from each side of the creek, and we're going to be revegetating this all the way down and making a beautiful nature corridor to give our animals our native animals a nice place to hang out. So this is our X-wing. Most of our systems, if not all of them on this farm, have been generously created, fine-tuned, and publicised by Joel and Daniel Salatin of Polyface Farms in North America. So this is one of Daniel's designs, I believe, who's Joel's son, and we absolutely love it. So Joel Salatin is really the godfather of regenerative agriculture as far as I'm concerned, and I love everything he does. I love everything that their farm stands for there in Virginia. And when we wanted to get into egg production, what better system than this? We love the X-wing for a few reasons. One is it keeps our chickens mobile, and we're always moving them onto new ground, and it was cheap to build. So I built this structure in a weekend with a few tradie mates who generously donated their time, and I've been feeding them back in beef and eggs ever since. We put it together in a weekend, and it cost less than $5,000 in equipment. That's the metal skids, the trusses, the nesting boxes, the whole lot. So the boys have just pulled the fence down quickly. We're actually going to let these birds free range for the day. We don't tie them up every day within the fence. The fence is just for protections, but if we have a look, Thomas, we're going to tow it a length and everyone can see what happens. So we've got a drawbar here to keep everything straight. Terry's going to push forward. The ground's very damp and sticky, so our little tractor's going to do the best it can. There we go. And what this does is, it means twice a week we can move our chickens off the ground, which they've been eating, scratching and manuring all over, and we can lock that manure in there and let the soil start to metabolize it, and we can move them into a more sanitary area forward where there's no manure and there's fresh feed and fresh bugs for them to have fun in, really. So we've got a mixture of different breeds here. We have some Isa Browns which have been factory bought because we don't have an incubation set up here big enough to hatch enough birds at once for our program, although we have just ordered a 400 egg incubator. And then some of the other breeds are heritage breeds that T-Bone's been line breeding over the years. So we've got Australorps and Leghorns and what other breeds have you had out here? With your home chooks that you've raised over the years, what breeds have you had in them?
Leghorn, Isa Browns, those black things, whatever they start with S.
I don't know.
Those black things there.
Yep. And we've definitely noticed, this might be interesting for anyone else that has an egg production program, but the Isa Browns, which are these dark brown little girls here, are famed for their egg producing capabilities. So if you go to a big battery shed where all the birds are locked into a big shed and they're all, 12 birds in a square foot or whatever it is, not quite that tight. This is the bird you'll see there because they lay 300 eggs a year. Their feed to egg conversion ratio is very good, so it makes them a profitable bird. So when we got into it, we're ringing around, we want a few hundred birds to start off our pastured egg enterprise, and that's all we could really get access to. And they do a good job. They don't forage as good as our own birds. They don't keep a lookout for predators. We get no ground predators. Nothing comes through our electric net. The foxes, the dogs are all fine, but eagles and kites are an issue for us here. But they're not quite as good at holding back from that. And when it gets really hot, they just can't hack it. So the birds that we breed, which are these ones, you can see they're different colored. We've got this golden one here, black one, red one. They're all just line bred, different concoctions of whatever we've had on the farm the last 15 years. But they're still laying a lot of eggs because they're all crossed with Isa Browns now. And they're tough as boots. They're better against predators. If one of our dogs comes and says hello, they'll fight the dog. They've got a lot better aerial awareness to run away from aerial predation there. Come up in the X-Wing, Thomas. Do you want me to give you a rest?
No.
Thomas has a big gimbal. We'll show you a photo in the video. I'll take a photo and we'll flick to it now. There we go, we'll put that photo in there. So we've got our nesting boxes in here. This is water, a water reservoir, which just gravity feeds into bell feeders under the structure. We keep a wheelie bin in here with some straw. So if they soil in their nesting box, or if they kick it out or the wind takes it, we can top that up and keep it always nice and clean and warm for them. We specifically don't use roll-away boxes. Roll-away boxes are the ones where the chickens lay an egg normally on turf and they roll out. Keeps your eggs cleaner, less breakages, less work, cheaper in the long run. But it deprives the chicken of its nesting experience. And if you watch any of these birds in here, when they come in, they'll spend a good 2-3 minutes turning around and picking up with their beaks the bits of straw and making themselves their own custom little nest. And we think that's a beautiful thing to let the chickens do. So it's more labor intensive for us, but we're happy to do it. So here we have another corridor that we're restoring and turning back to a sort of silvopasture sort of land. So along the side here is a spine of trees that Terry planted about 10 or so years ago. They're doing quite well, all natives. And that's a traditional way of planting, I guess, windbreaks and shade breaks and nature corridors in a agricultural context in Australia. Just one row of trees and you fence it off for a few years and off you go. I really want to give some depth to this, so it's not just one awkward row of trees. So we fenced out an extension next door, which is about 50 meters plus. It just so happens to have a spillway that our second dam behind us, which we'll see later, spills over in a heavy rain event, and this has just been another casualty of erosion and poor management over the past. So we fenced it off and we have built some little weir walls in it. So the leaky weir system by Peter Andrews of the Mulloon Institute is the system that we're sort of imitating here. Their leaky weir system normally leaks a bit more than ours. We've just put dirt down. It was the quickest and easiest for us. We had the resources and the capabilities here, but we have fitted monk pipes. This is just a bit of pipe that goes straight down to the bottom of the the pond here, and then on a 90-degree elbow, it shoots straight underneath me and comes out on the other side of the wall down there. And we can just grab that and ratchet it higher or lower. So as we push it down or up, we're changing the water table height, and we can regulate the water flow as needed and control the height. And there's actually 3 of these little ponds, little leaky weirs before the dam. So we're catching quite a bit of extra water, and this has only been fenced off, geez, I want to say 6 months, and we're super encouraged by the growth of the reeds coming through. And over the different seasons, even though it hasn't had much time to rehabilitate itself, the frogs, dragonflies and other insect life, and even turtles we've found. I was actually swimming in this bed here with my little son Otto, who, if you follow the farm, you've probably seen little 2-year-old Otto. Well, swimming in here in summer, having a great old time, and I saw a head coming towards us in the water and it looked like a snake, and I quickly put Otto on the side of the bank and hopped out myself, and then the shell floated up behind it. We had a beautiful little turtle in here, which was great. And we've also planted a bunch more trees, which you can't see because the grass is doing so fantastically, but Thomas is getting soaked, the poor cameraman, walking in all this lush grass. But sporadically and strategically planted throughout this area, which is fenced off, we have put in more natives. We've passed a couple there, but here's one. You can see it's obviously died back a bit in summer because of how hot it was, and now it's coming up through. Another one here. This one's probably grown triple the height since we put it in, and we've just spaced these out from the ridge, the pre-existing ridge, all the way to the leaky weirs. And you can see once you get here and start working up, they become denser and denser. It might be hard to see on the camera, but if you're in person, you can see the eyes for them. Oh look, we got some deadly nightshade. That'll be good as some brekkie. I haven't had breakfast yet. Good. We'll go catch up with the boys. They've just finished moving the chooks, and we will go and check on the cattle. So the eggs from the X-Wing, the main purpose for the eggs was to again supply our cafe in town, which goes through a decent amount. We go through, I think, 1,400 eggs a week at the moment. So we've got about 300 hens here. And we've recently just picked up an account to supply retail eggs to a local organic store called Alma Organics. And they've been selling the eggs on the shelf there. I'm gonna grab the camera and let Thomas get over. This is where we've dumped a load of compost. So this is actually just kitchen scraps. When we go into town and do our deliveries to the restaurants for eggs and that sort of thing, we pick up all the kitchen scraps in big wheelie bins. We bring them out to the farm, and we've got compost heaps up the front, which I'll show you on the way out. And sometimes the kitchen scraps don't always make it to the compost pit. We can't feed it to the pigs in Australia. Swill feeding is illegal, and it's illegal to feed pigs animal products that may have had interaction with animal products. So if we've got a bucket full of carrots but it's been chopped in the same kitchen as a bit of beef or chicken, we can't give it to the pigs. So the pigs don't get any of the scraps, but sometimes the chickens do, because there's nothing wrong with chickens having a little bit of kitchen scraps. And here you can see we've dropped a compost heap, and the chickens have scratched through it, and we've got all these self-seeding tomatoes coming up, and we've got a little pumpkin, it looks like, coming up here. The same as our pigs, we make the distinction that our chickens are not free range. We make the distinction that they're pastured, trying to communicate to our customers that they're always being put forward onto fresh grasses and not just relegated to barren paddocks with a bit of room. Because we believe in the wild, pigs and birds would never choose to be in a paddock with no life or biomass in it. Check this out, Thomas. I was just telling you about our dragonflies, that we've got thousands of them out here. They're brilliant, all different fluorescent colours. One of the questions we always get when people see photos of our chickens outside is, what about foxes? What about foxes? What about foxes? And my answer at the moment is, what about foxes? This is a poultry net. And if you come close, Thomas, you can see that all these horizontal wires have aluminium braiding through them. So all the horizontal ones, and all the vertical wires are just nylon, and that's all the way to the bottom. So of an evening when we lock the birds up, we tie this end together, we tie the other end, all the birds are on the inside. They naturally come home to roost when it's dark. Chickens are clock watchers. They're up at light and they're back at light. And we have a little solar energizer down there. It's a solar panel, it's only this big, with a little car battery attached. It doesn't need to, you don't need to have a huge reservoir of power to keep this thing kicking overnight, because it just pulses. The electric cable, the electric pulse just transmits periodically through here. And once a fox or a dog or whatever your ground predator issue is, puts their wet nose on this cable, it's game over. They don't come back and try again. We are experiencing some aerial predation. So in this area we have hawks, eagles and kites, and we've got a beautiful pair of mating sea eagles over the ridge on the neighbour's farm, the Webb's farm over there. Beautiful animals, and we're lucky to have them in the area, but they can pick up and fly off with a chicken. And then we also have kites, and if there's a weak bird, an old bird or a young bird that's too far out of the reaches of the flock, the kite will come down and eat it on the floor, can't quite fly away with it. So we've got a few projects coming together for that. One, we're going to mount some big mirrors on the sides and roof of the X-Wing. We've read that some people have put big like roadside mirrors, and when the birds of prey have seen the reflection of themselves, they've flown away. And the other thing is Terry's driving to Coldstream on Thursday to pick up a Maremma, which is a 6-year-old girl, livestock guardian dog, quite well trained allegedly. And the nice gentleman who's selling it to us assures us that the dog has proven its worthwhileness in regards to birds of prey, the raptors. So off we go. We'll go to the cows. Hold on. So here we have our mob of cattle. There's about 40 here. We move the cattle here most of the time daily. So pigs every 2 weeks, chickens twice a week, cattle every day. They're the systems that have been proven. We're not here to reinvent the wheel. We just want to copy people who are doing it really well. So Terry's just winding back the braided hot wire that we're using as a temporary fence. And the cattle, they learn really quickly what to do. And interestingly, the cattle have always known, they've always picked it up really quick, especially when you're taking them off feed that they've eaten and trampled. And if you film this way, Thomas, when they get in here, they get all frisky and they kick their legs in the sky. But something interestingly that trained the cattle really quickly and they became extra good was when we added some dairy cows into the mix. We all know that dairy cows are very routine based, and they line up and they go to the same bay for the milking in the morning and the rest of it. And they're an older, more experienced animal. The dairy cows we have here, there's 2 that are 7-year-old, 1 that's 5. Dairy cows, when they've finished their milking life, are what the industry refers to as choppers, and they get sold off to the local abattoir, normally for a fairly nominal rate, and they just get turned into hamburger. And I believe that the age that's put on the beef throughout their life, they've been milking for 6 or 7 years, if it's finished properly on a good quality pasture like we've got here, I believe we can turn them into a premium beef product and further honour that animal that's worked for so hard into being a premium product rather than chopped up for a Hungry Jack's burger or whatever. So you can see they've run into the new paddock. There's been looks like Michael's going to go push the other ones through the other end. We've spooked these 15 or so because they're not used to 3 people and 2 cars and a cameraman coming down. They're just used to 1 guy in a tractor. We've had a few questions about the process of strip grazing, so I'll show you a few of our little systems. We got to bring the trailer through to still T-bone. There's 3 things when we're moving the cattle into the new product that we've got to take into account. Besides grass. Grass is the most obvious one, and the question that I get a lot is, how do you know how much space to give them? And the only real answer for that is just by observing and monitoring your livestock. We don't, there's no hard and fast rule. All your cattle have different requirements. We've got calves, we've got yearlings, we've got heifers, we've got cows, we've got one that's carrying a calf at the moment. They've all got different eating requirements, and it's a bit hard just to put a solid rule on them. But we put them into an area, we observe it, and I want to come back tomorrow morning when I move these, and I want to see about 30% of the grass eaten. So, you know, here we've got grass about 30 centimetres off the ground. We want to see the top 10 centimetres pruned off, and you can tell it's pruned when you come through. because it's all missing its tops and it's got little flat heads on it where the cattle have chopped it. We want to see 30% trampled, so they've stepped on it, and once a cow steps on something in your small strip grazing operation, they're not going to eat it because it's basically been soiled by their feet. Same thing as when they pee and poo, they're not going to then eat that grass straight away. And then we want to see 30% left in a pretty good stead. And so we come in, we got the 30-30-30 rule. It's very easy. If you go too hard on a paddock, don't be hard on yourself. Just move them up, give them a next big paddock next time. And if they don't eat everything and it's not perfect, leave them a bit longer or adjust the next paddock accordingly. It's a constant learning experience. Your grass grows at all different rates throughout the year. So one thing we look for is the grass. The second thing we need to do is fence the area. So we've just got poly braid, and I won't touch this because it's hot at the moment, but this is just a braided poly wire which carries the wire. So we're using Kiwi Tech fiberglass fence posts. So these are, I think they're $6 or $7 each. Super lightweight. We like them because we can carry enough of these to fence 300 to 400 meters in one hit. If you were to do that with pigtails, those metal posts or something, to carry enough to do 300 or 400 meters, you'd have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or a real farmer, not a hobby farmer. And then we just have a little handle, a metal handle on one end, so that we can hook this onto the hot wire. And now that's hot. And on the other end, we've got a plastic handle, and we hook the plastic handle on to the wire at the same height, which is over on the other side of the fence, is still hot, but that just stops the line, and so it doesn't disrupt your circuit of your electricity flowing around the farm. So one end's metal, one end's plastic. You roll it out, you hook it on one end. I can't show you here, but there's still a reel. You just loop it up. It's very simple to do. There's 1,000 different guys on YouTube showing you how to do it. And if that's nice and hot, we'll test this, and this will be kicking at like 6.5, 7. That's nice and hot. The cattle come and have a lick on it, and they don't want to get through it. It might not be enough fence to contain an unhappy steer, but when you're moving your cows every day to a fresh swath of grass like this, they're not left wanting. They don't want to go anywhere. They're not looking over the neighbour's fence wondering what's better. Our perimeter fences to our farm are all slowly inclining in as our neighbours' cattle stick their head through the fence to eat our forage on our side. They're all slowly inclining in. So we have really no issues with containing our stock because they want to be here. So that's the second thing, the fence. The third thing is water, and we'll move our water up and show you, but we've got a line buried around the farm. So we'll show you up at the second dam that we spoke about before. We've got a solar pump where we have buried about 800 meters of pipe under the ground. Not very far. It doesn't get very cold here. We're not worried about the line freezing. We've only buried it about 20, 30 centimeters deep. We're more so burying it for longevity's sake, so the cattle don't trample on it and those sort of things, and to keep the water cool in summer, because it gets so hot here, the water would be undrinkable if the black poly pipe was sitting on the surface. So we've buried it 20, 30 centimeters down, 1.25 inch ag pipe, and with every 50 meters all around the farm, we've got a turf valve. And I'll show you what the turf valve looks like, but we've got a pressure pump at the top because we don't have much fall on the property, so we couldn't use gravity. And there's always water available. You put the turf pump in and the water flows. And the last thing, I know I said 3 things, but grass is obviously number 1. The 4th thing that we look for after grass, fencing, water is shade. Down here on the river flats, there's no trees. We are planting lots of trees. Every dozen retail eggs we sell through any of our outlets, we commit to planting 1 more tree on the farm. So, you know, at this rate, we're accumulating the funds to be planting 60, 70 trees a week, which is just sensational. But the last thing that we look for is shade. So we have a trailer that we're going to tow over and show you. It's got multi-purposes, but one of the purposes is to give our cattle shade. And on days like today in this beautiful autumn climate, it doesn't matter, but during our summer, it's definitely something that we need to consider. Rightio, we'll get everything else set up and we'll show you what we do. So if you look at the grass in the paddock that we've just moved the livestock into. It's tall and lush and vibrant and ready for a pruning. And this is the paddock that they've been in the last day. And you can see how much they've chopped it. We just talked about that 30 rule of chopping. So they've grazed the tops of it off. And then all through here, you can see where it's bent over. They've stepped on it and pushed it over. There's manure all around me. And there's still a good ground cover. So if I dig in here, you know, we've still got like a 20 millimeter ground cover of mulch, last year's dead grass because we didn't overgraze, we left some there, and then we got some fresh grasses that the cattle have pushed on, and that's really what we want to do. We want to leave the grass with a good amount of life left in it so it can kick back reasonably well, and a ground cover to hold all that moisture in. Just every time you move a paddock, just assess how you think you've gone. This is probably starting to be grazed a little bit hard, but this is the end of the paddock where their shade and water is, so it always gets hammered. They spend more time here and everything gets chewed out more, and I can just tell by eyeballing, if we just go 10 meters down, the pasture's grazed to a level that I'm relatively happy with it. And now look at the cows. They've come in, and you don't have to teach them what to do, folks. They're built to eat. Let them go. So the boys are bringing we call it our treehouse cafeteria because it's a tree mimic. Its purpose is to give shade to the cattle, which they would normally get off a tree. And it's the cafeteria, you'll see why, but we have minerals in it for the cattle to choose from. Beautiful thing about using single braid polywire is it's easy enough, you just drive over it. Oh, the back wheel might get it. Yep, you're right. So in a paddock that's got poor sections in it where there might be compacted soil or a dead spot for whatever reason, or a higher density of weeds, we would plant our cafeteria right on top of it. We'd park it right on top to concentrate the impact of the animals all the way around it, because that heavier impact, if you've got hard packed soil, they'll chip it up and loosen it up, let water get in, they'll put down extra manure, extra urine, and trample all the weeds down and hopefully disrupt their seed cycle. At the moment, this paddock is pretty even all over, so we're just parking it up the front just for ease of movement. And we've got their water system here. We'll show you how their water works now. This isn't the ideal trough to have moving around. It doesn't like being moved. The fittings on it are fairly firm, but we had it and we're going to use it until it doesn't work anymore. Then we'll buy a new one. There's no point buying a new better one while this one still works. One of my favorite sayings is, again, a throwback to the Salatin dynasty in America, but it's helped me a lot. I went and saw Joel Salatin at a Taranaki farm, I guess farm weekend, demonstration weekend, with Ben Falloon at Taranaki Farm in Wood End there. And during one of his presentations, Joel was talking about how he wasn't a good woodworker and this and that, and his mantra is good enough is perfect. And I've always struggled with, I'm not good with wood, so I would have to pay a tradie to do it because we want it to look nice and be properly. But overcoming that issue of thinking if it's not perfect, it's not good enough, and then being resolved that good enough is perfect, has completely changed my life and the way we do things here around the farm. And this is good enough and it works, so it's perfect. So Michael's going to show you how the turf valve works. So you might need to point down, Thomas, and show everyone what we've got in there, but we've just got a bucket just to keep bugs and bubs and snakes. You can see there's a bit of pressure there. We're pushing 40-50 psi. So if you have a look down, Thomas, can you get in there? Maybe we'll get a close up on the way up, but that's a turf valve, and show them in your hand, Michael. It's just a lever that you'll hook in, and once you push in, it releases the water flow. So if we show you the trough here, we open up this end, there's a float valve under the head here, and this one little trough that we put in the paddock easily is feeding our 40 head at the moment. It's cool, so they're not too thirsty. This is our 1.25 inch pipe that we've laid all around the farm under the ground, about 20 centimeters under the ground, 32 millimeter. And we just got a saddle clamp screwed on, and then you drill a hole into the pipe, and then we install this turf valve with this lid here. So when this, I won't unplug it now because it'll spray the cameraman, but when this plug is not in it, there's no water being released through there. There's a pressure coupler in there, but when we plug it in, the water starts flowing, and we've just got a 6 meter bit of hose on here attached to our trough where the cattle are. You can pan around and show them the trough and the cattle. Bob's your uncle, they got water. Look at the meat. So our cafeteria here is exactly as it sounds, and under this rubber matting, the cattle come in and they lift this up with their nose, and they have a choice of eating a different range of minerals. So we'll show you the construction of this, but this is a 8x5 trailer, I think, that we picked up on Facebook for a couple $100. And we've got lime here, we've got dolomite, seaweed meal, which is their favorite, and they fight over it and they keep ripping the bucket out. So they're going through 2 buckets a week of that at the moment. We've got salt, and on the other side we've got copper sulfate and a few other things. I can show you them. Let's have a look. We may as well do it properly. There's more salt there. We've got, the blue one's the copper sulfate. We've got sulfur, and then we've got magnesium, which they've barely touched. But these are just different minerals that the cattle can tell what they're deficient in. And it's interesting, like when we had these dairy girls come from the farm they've spent 7 years on, they nailed dolomite and the seaweed meal where none of our cattle had touched the dolomite at all. And the interesting thing about when they're feeding off these minerals is whatever they're ingesting, they're manuring out around 80–85% of it. So those minerals are in turn being put into our soil and they're remineralizing our pastures. I've read really interesting studies of farmers that have been doing this sort of work for 30 years, and the consumption of the minerals through their livestock has dropped to 80% because they've remineralized their soils, and in turn their forage is richer and more nutrient dense, and it isn't needed. So all we've done to construct this, you can see we've built the shade structure with some scrap bits of wood we had laying around. We've used a canvas here that we actually got from the bike shop in town. And then we've just put these beams in and drilled the buckets into them. I don't know how to explain it much more than that. I'm not very technically minded, but not hard, and it's good enough and it works. And we've got a little toolbox here, this bucket. We keep toolboxes everywhere in all of our different structures everywhere, just with essential tools, so we don't always have to run back to the shed to get stuff. And we've got some extra fence posts and extra wire reels. We like to use geared wire reels. So when you do one turn, when you're winding the wire up, so this would be like this, one turn of the handle is 3 or 4 turns of the spool. If you're trying to wind up 200 or 300 meters, going at a 1-to-1 gearing ratio, it takes forever and your arm will fall off and you'd be cursing that you're wasting your time doing it all. This is actually a 1-to-1. We just use this for to keep them off the pipes and that sort of thing. But all the ones we lay out any sort of distance with are all geared. So if you're getting into a strip grazing system, do yourself a favor, get a geared reel. Right, T-Bone? So we've just said bye to Terry and Michael. We've just gone down and had a look at the chickens and then the cattle, and from this angle maybe you can put everything together as to where we were. A few things that we haven't looked at today is we've got our brush block down there. It's about 10 acres of a revegetation program that we did with the Goona Woolshed Land Care Group, which is coming along really well, but we won't go through that this morning. And we're just going to walk behind the house here. I'm going to show you one of our apiaries, which is where we have our bees set up. I'm going to quickly show you our compost, and then I'll show you our solar pump, because there's some questions that I received. Some people wanted to know about our compost, and some other people wanted to know how we get water around the farm. So we'll have a look at those things, and then we're done. Let's have a look. So here we are in one of our apiaries out at the farm, and in this particular setup we have 2 flow hives, which are a great little beehive. It's an Australian design by a mob out of Byron Bay, I think. And the great thing about the flow hive is to extract the honey, you don't need any special equipment. So normally to extract the honey, you would pull the frame out of the traditional bee box. You would have to cut the honeycomb off, normally with like a heated knife. Then you would put it in a spinner, which spins, and all the honey gets extracted from that spinning action, a centrifuge. And you know, there's just a lot of equipment needed, a lot of processes. This hive here, Thomas, if you come around, when this is full of honey, you just put a tool in the top here. You put a tool in there and you crack it open, which moves all these plastic framed honeycombs, twists them. The plug's open here and the honey just pours out. I've given it a really poor explanation then, but it's easy, trust me, it's simple to do. These are great for your backyard beekeeper. If you just want to have 1 or 2 hives, we highly recommend them. As you just saw, there's little windows where you can watch the bees inside, and the kids love it. Once you start to want more than 1 or 2 beehives, the economy of scale doesn't really add up. Because these are quite expensive. So once you want more than a few hives, the traditional boxes, whether they be stacked boxes or horizontal hives, we think are a bit more economical because they're a lot cheaper, and once you get the equipment, the processing time out of these is quite slow. It's all gravity fed. And the other thing we found is, although we love the honey out of here, because you're doing it right in the field, there's some environmental factors you have to concern. So it's not always easy to keep insects out of the honey or bees themselves, and sometimes you might end up with a bit of pollen or a bit of dust or something in your honey jar. Doesn't matter, doesn't worry us as a family. We're quite happy to have bugs, grubs and all, but when you're selling it to a consumer, it needs to be a little bit more on point than that. We've actually currently got 12 beehives on the farm at the moment, scattered all around the farm. We sold out of our honey in like 2 months this year. It was very popular. We have 10 more hives and swarms on order for when spring starts. So we're really looking forward to taking these livestock, bees are classed as livestock, taking this part of our farm to the next level and hopefully having a bit more of a supply. And we're hoping this season's not as catastrophically dry, so the bees do a little bit better. It's been too dry and it's been too cold, and they've had a really tough time locally. Let's go show you the compost. We're in one of our front paddocks at the moment, and this paddock has our stockyard in it. So when we've got cattle and pigs getting picked up, they're put through that facility there. And it's quite small, and it's got one of our dams in it, which we'll see in a sec. So we've actually got this whole paddock fenced off. Livestock very rarely graze in here because we want to keep them out of our waterway. So this is where we're running our little compost program. So we've got a few piles of compost. You can see one here, and Thomas, you can show them another pile of compost over there. And we've also got a pile of wood chips there as well, which we use in the garden and different places. But our compost, the way we do this is we have a local stable where they wanted to get rid of all their horse manure, and we spoke to them, and they were a little bit apprehensive about receiving horse manure when their bedding may have been straw that had been treated with chemicals during its growing phase. We've heard about, there's a market gardener in England, Charles, who was using horse manure out of a stable, and it killed all of his plants, and he ended up figuring out that it was the residual chemicals that were used on that crop. We spoke to this stable, and they actually use scrap sawdust from a mill. So the trees are cut, taken to the mill and milled into pieces. They've got all their sawdust left, so there's no straw bedding in here, which suited us fine. And that's the carbon component. So in a compost, you need 30% manure, 30% carbon, which is the sawdust in this case, and then 30% green material. So what we do is once a week, we drive around, do a loop of Albury, and in our big van, we've got 9 wheelie bins, and we drop off empty wheelie bins and pick up full wheelie bins. We go to cafes, restaurants, daycare centres, anywhere that'll have one, and we bring all the green waste back, so there's banana peels and sandwiches and meat bones and everything, and we tip all the bins out. We get the tractor and we mix it into here, and these piles cook along at 70, 80 degrees inside. They're steaming hot. It breaks down really quick, and we're stockpiling this compost. We use it in our garden, in our market garden at the front, and we're also planning when spring comes around to go out to a couple of our paddocks that we think could use it more than others, and we're just going to broadcast it out on the paddocks and feed the soil, give them a meal. We're always feeding everyone else around here. Why not feed some worms? We'll go and show you the solar pump now. Here we have some self-seeded melons. So this is where previous compost piles were, just like what we looked at. We had piles here, and we've used that compost elsewhere. And out of the, I can show you a pumpkin. Out of the compost piles, we've had pumpkin seeds and melon seeds germinate. So we've let them go, and we've got pumpkins coming, which is exciting. Didn't plant them, didn't water them. I guess we fertilized them though, because they were a compost heap. This is our second dam. So we don't have a bore, we don't have a well, we don't water our livestock off mains. This is our, actually correction, we water our chickens off mains because we have to. That's the rules. But our pigs and our stock get rainwater. And this is our solar pump. I'll just make sure there's no snakes in there. So this is a caravan chassis. I bought a second-hand caravan off Facebook Marketplace. Once again, great place to buy things. The caravan was $300 or $400. I had chickens in it for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then we built the X-Wing and didn't need it anymore. So we ripped the body off the chassis. You end up with a really nice big, super lightweight chassis out of a caravan body. We've mounted these caravan panels with this frame that we've built. And then we've got a couple big batteries in here that obviously are getting charged by the solar panels. We've got a couple batteries in here, and then we've got our pump with our little pressure valve here. So this is a pressure pump that's sucking out of our dam there, and we always have it, everything's primed at about 40 pounds. So there's always water in the pipes ready to go. And when the cattle start drinking and the float valve dips, the water just gets shoved through to their trough, and when it fills up again, it all stops. And at the moment, this is just working just to obviously fill up pressure. The cattle down there are drinking. Probably the biggest challenge we had setting all this up was getting the suction out of the dam working properly. Because it's going through a pump, we needed a filter, and if you go to a pump wholesaler or something and ask for first you need a foot valve, which is the foot valves at the end of the pipe, which you suck in. So when you prime the pipe and it's full of water, and you have that whole line primed to the pump, that when it stops pumping, it doesn't backflow and fill it up with air, because the air will damage your pump. So you put a foot valve on there, which locks the air in. It only lets the water come in, or won't let it go out. And then you need to put a filter around your foot valve. When you go to the plumbing wholesalers, they don't sell filters for that. So we've been through a few different reiterations, and the most recent version of a homemade filter, which has worked the longest, is a bucket, which we've put the foot valve into, and we've siliconed the top, we've secured it in there. We've drilled heaps of really big holes in the bucket, and then we've drilled fly screen all around it, and it seems to be working fine. We haven't had any issues. This has been running untouched and unserviced with no breakdowns for a couple months now, so we're pretty happy with the setup. And once again, folks, it's portable. So if this dam gets a bit low and we want to suck water out of the other dam, all we have to do is hook this onto the tow ball, unclip the water, pull the earthing rod out, drive over to the other dam, put the earthing rod in, hook it into the pipes over there, and off we go. And if we ever have to move down to pump water from a creek or anything, this is available for that. So really enjoying having portable infrastructure. I'll quickly give you a look at the second dam before we wrap up. This has also had stock access blocked. You can see there's a float for our foot valve and our filter. We put a tractor tire on it to keep it to the top, where we sort of want the foot valve about 30 centimeters under the surface of the water. Right on the top of the water, it's a bit gunky. You've got leaves, you've got dead insects, you've got all different things that can block your filter and block your pump. And then we don't want it dragging along the bottom. Obviously it'll be picking up dirt and all the scud. So we just wanted about 30 centimeters from the top of the water source. So we've just used the tire there to do that, and all the reeds are bouncing back. We did Michael planted a heap in here, and we're really happy with how this little ecosystem is going. And obviously it's full of water. We've had some great rains this year. It really feels like the drought's turning around, and we've got a full dam, so we're very happy. So thank you for coming along on the first Wolki Farm tour. Unfortunately, you couldn't be here. I hope that was interesting. We've kept the video long format, so you're driving through the paddocks with us, and hopefully your kids at home got a kick out of seeing the tractor tear around through the paddocks and that sort of thing. Our next seasonal farm tour, hopefully we'll go ahead with bodies allowed on the floor. So when we're allowed to host our winter tour with people here, if the virus and all the pandemic situations cleared up, we'd love to see you here in Albury Wodonga. Thanks everyone.